The ocean stretched endlessly in every direction. Dawn light filtered through smoke and steam rising from the water. Commander Edward Parker watched in silence as flames danced across the Pacific's surface. The burning hull of USS Hornet was disappearing beneath the waves. 140 American sailors went down with her. The last fleet carrier in the Pacific was gone. Fire spread across the water like liquid gold. Ruptured fuel tanks had turned the sea into a mirror of destruction. The sight burned itself into Parker's memory. 4 carriers in 10 months. At this rate, nothing would be left by Christmas. His personal log contained words that could destroy his career. Defeatism wasn't tolerated among naval officers, but the truth demanded recording. Through the smoky darkness, he had witnessed America's 4th carrier loss of 1942. May 8th had brought the first blow. Lexington sank at Coral Sea. June 7th delivered the second punch. Yorktown went down at Midway. September 15th added the 3rd casualty. Wasp fell to torpedoes off Guadalcanal. Now Hornet joined her sisters on the bottom. October 27, 1942 marked the darkest moment in American naval history. The Imperial Japanese Navy had proven itself superior to American expectations. Intelligence reports had dismissed them as inferior copycats. Reality painted a different picture. Japanese shipyards from Yokosuka to Kure were adding new carriers to their fleet. America was bleeding ships faster than anyone had thought possible. The mathematics of naval warfare had shifted dramatically against the United States. 3,700 miles away, in Newport News, Virginia, a welder named Margaret Thompson was beginning her night shift. Neither she nor Commander Parker understood what was about to unfold. This moment of maximum despair would trigger the most extraordinary production miracle in naval history. The mathematics of victory were about to change completely. Battle tactics and superior seamanship wouldn't decide the outcome. Welding torches and assembly lines would rewrite the rules of naval warfare. The sheer productive fury of an awakened democracy was about to transform everything. Japanese naval officers would later describe fighting America as battling the stars themselves. No matter how many you destroyed, more appeared in the sky. Within 3 years, American shipyards would launch 14 Essex-class fleet carriers that saw combat. This exceeded Japan's total carrier production for the entire war. The transformation from disaster to dominance wouldn't come through tactical brilliance. No technological breakthrough would provide the answer. Something more fundamental would change the war's trajectory. The complete mobilization of American industrial democracy was beginning. Housewives would become welders. Farm boys would master shipfitting skills. The entire nation would convert into what Admiral Yamamoto had feared most. An arsenal of unlimited productive capacity was awakening. The gathering catastrophe had started months earlier in the Coral Sea. May 8, 1942, brought America's first fleet carrier loss. USS Lexington absorbed devastating damage from Japanese carrier aircraft. 2 torpedo hits and 3 bomb strikes sealed her fate. Heroic damage control efforts initially saved the giant ship. Lexington had been converted from a battlecruiser hull before the war. She was one of America's 2 largest pre-war carriers, but gasoline vapors from ruptured aviation fuel tanks triggered massive secondary explosions. Lady Lex went down with 216 crew members. Captain Frederick Sherman would later testify before Congress about the disaster. The arithmetic was simple and terrifying. America had started the war with 7 fleet carriers in the Pacific. Japan possessed 10 operational carriers. Trading evenly meant eventual defeat. Losing carriers faster than the enemy guaranteed catastrophe. The second blow fell just 1 month later. USS Yorktown had been heroically patched together after Coral Sea damage. Pearl Harbor shipyard workers accomplished repairs in just 48 hours. June 7, 1942, brought the carrier's final battle. Despite her crucial role in the Midway victory, Yorktown succumbed to Japanese submarine torpedoes. the submarine I-168 delivered the killing blow. Though Midway marked a strategic triumph with 4 Japanese carriers sunk, America had lost another precious fleet carrier. September brought the third catastrophe. USS Wasp was operating off Guadalcanal when disaster struck. September 15, 1942, saw Japanese submarine I-19 deliver 3 torpedo hits. The carrier burned for hours before being scuttled by American destroyers. Of the 7 fleet carriers available at the war's start, America had now lost 3. Then came the knockout blow. The Battle of Santa Cruz stretched from October 26 to 27, 1942. USS Hornet faced coordinated Japanese dive bomber and torpedo plane attacks. The veteran carrier had participated in the Doolittle raid and fought at Midway. Despite desperate efforts to save her, including attempts to tow the burning ship to safety, advancing Japanese surface forces made rescue impossible. Japanese destroyers Makigumo and Akigumo finished what their aircraft had started. In Washington, Admiral Ernest King faced Congress with stark mathematics. The Chief of Naval Operations delivered devastating news. America possessed 1 operational fleet carrier in the Pacific. Enterprise stood alone against 10 Japanese carriers. Simple arithmetic suggested the war was already lost. But Admiral King didn't know about Margaret Thompson. He had no knowledge of the 1.7 million workers who would flood American shipyards by 1944. Henry Kaiser's revolutionary techniques remained unknown to him. Kaiser was about to reduce Liberty ship construction time from 230 days to an incredible 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes. American shipyards had launched exactly 1 fleet carrier in 1941. They were about to achieve what seemed impossible. The transformation began not in military planning rooms, but in accounting offices. Newport News Shipbuilding would lead the revolution. December 8, 1941 brought an emergency meeting. One day after Pearl Harbor Yard Supervisor Clay Bedford addressed his foremen. Everything they knew about shipbuilding had to be forgotten. Carriers would be built like Ford manufactured automobiles. The revolution started with a simple observation. Helen Matthews had been a seamstress before joining the emergency workforce expansion. Watching skilled workers laboriously rivet hull plates in place, she asked her supervisor a crucial question. Why not sew the metal together like fabric, using 1 continuous seam, instead of thousands of individual dots? The supervisor laughed, then stopped thinking. Welding instead of riveting could cut assembly time by 75%. But welding required different skills. These were simpler skills that could be taught to anyone in days. Master riveters required years of training. By summer 1943, Essex-class carriers were rolling off the ways at an incomprehensible pace. USS Essex herself had been laid down April 28, 1941. She was commissioned December 31, 1942. Just 20 months separated keel laying from combat readiness. That was merely the beginning of the acceleration. Brooklyn Navy Yard developed revolutionary techniques under shipfitter First Class Giuseppe DiMaggio. The cousin of the famous baseball player led crews that transformed aircraft elevator installation. Instead of building elevators in place piece by piece, they pre-assembled entire platforms on shore. Massive cranes lifted completed elevator systems into position. 6 weeks of construction time vanished from each carrier. The techniques pioneered at Kaiser's Richmond facility spread throughout the industry. Prefabrication revolutionized construction methods. Deckhouses and other fixtures were assembled in production areas. Workers could build components on their sides or upside down. This made welding easier and produced stronger joints. Tasks that had required 1,000 workers for a month now needed 200 workers for a week. The numbers accumulated with frightening speed. USS Yorktown CV-10 was laid down December 1, 1941. She was commissioned April 15, 1943. USS Intrepid followed the same timeline. Laid down December 1, 1941, she was commissioned August 16, 1943. USS Hornet CV-12 was laid down August 3, 1942. She joined the fleet November 29, 1943. USS Franklin began construction December 7, 1942. She was commissioned January 31, 1944. Each launching happened faster than the previous one. Philip Kellogg kept a welder's diary at Bethlehem Steel's Four River Shipyard. His entries captured the incredible acceleration. January 1943 saw carriers launching every 60 days. By June, the interval had dropped to 45 days. December 1943 brought launches every 30 days. The Japanese must think Americans were using magic, according to Kellogg's diary. The magic was indeed real, but it was human magic. By April 1943, 40% of workers in Kaiser's shipyards and prefabrication facilities were women. Norfolk Naval Shipyard witnessed remarkable transformations. Emma Rodriguez had been a Mexican-American mother of 3. She had never held a tool larger than a sewing needle before the war. She became the fastest riveter in the yard. Rodriguez could drive 30 rivets per minute with each one perfect. Executive Order 8802 prohibited discrimination in defense industries. This opened shipyard positions previously barred to African-American workers. James Washington had been a sharecropper in Alabama. He became a master pipe fitter at Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. Washington installed fuel lines on 5 carriers, with each one completed faster than the last. The workers understood they weren't just building ships, they were racing against death itself. Every day without carriers meant more American sailors and Marines dying on Pacific islands. Photographs from the fleet were posted on every shipyard wall. USS Enterprise fights alone. She needs sisters. Build them now. Revolutionary production techniques accelerated beyond human effort alone. New York Naval Yard engineers developed modular construction methods. Instead of building carriers from the keel up piece by piece, they constructed entire sections complete with wiring, plumbing, and ventilation systems. These sections assembled like giant building blocks. Highly standardized components streamlined production further. Construction time dropped to as little as 14 months for the fastest builds. Every carrier used identical pumps, electrical panels, and fittings wherever possible. Parts manufactured in Detroit could be installed in carriers building at Newport News, Brooklyn, or Philadelphia without modification. The Essex class became the most significant warship class in American naval history. These weren't mere replacements for lost carriers. They were bigger, faster, and more capable than anything built before. Each displaced 2,700 tons and could carry 90 to 100 aircraft. They could steam at 33 knots. This made them faster than most destroyers. The Japanese noticed the transformation immediately. Commander Masatake Okumiya served as air staff officer with the Japanese combined fleet. His diary entries revealed growing concern. The Americans were building carriers faster than Japan could train pilots. Each new carrier surpassed anything in the Japanese fleet. This wasn't the same Navy attacked at Pearl Harbor. By March 1944, American shipyards had achieved the impossible. Essex-class carrier launches exceeded the combined carrier production of every other nation on Earth. While major naval yards built fleet carriers, Henry Kaiser revolutionized escort carrier construction. The Jeep carriers provided air cover for invasion fleets and hunted submarines. Kaiser's Vancouver shipyard alone produced 50 escort carriers. Techniques developed for Liberty ships were adapted for carrier construction. USS Casablanca led the most numerous class of carriers ever built. The escort carrier went from keel laying to commissioning in less than 8 months. Japanese escort carrier Shinyo required 2 years to complete by comparison. The ship had been converted from a passenger liner. Behind every rivet and weld lay a supply chain stretching across the continent. Steel for carrier flight decks came from Pittsburgh mills running 24 hours daily. Aluminum for aircraft came from Alcoa plants in Tennessee. These facilities consumed more electricity than entire cities. Goodyear's Akron, Ohio plant produced carrier arresting gear cables. Each cable could stop a 12,000-pound fighter traveling at 100 miles per hour. Plant manager William Davis pushed production from 10 cables monthly in 1942 to 200 monthly by 1944. Ships without crews remained useless metal. Captain Daniel Gallery proposed using the Great Lakes as a training ground. USS Wolverine and USS Sable were paddle-wheel steamers converted to training carriers. Operating from Chicago's Navy Pier, these ships qualified 500 pilots monthly by 1944. In Tokyo, the Imperial Naval Staff watched intelligence reports with growing horror. Captain Toshikazu Omai served as operations officer for the combined fleet. His post-war testimony revealed the scope of Japanese miscalculation. They had expected America to build ships replacing losses. Estimates suggested 6 or 7 fleet carriers might be completed by 1945. The actual numbers exceeded comprehension. Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa commanded the Japanese carrier force at the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944. He faced 9 American fleet carriers and 8 light carriers with his 6 carriers. This wasn't a battle, he later wrote. It was an execution. By January 1945, American shipyards had achieved an impossible rhythm. Brooklyn Navy Yard worked on 3 carriers simultaneously. Newport News had carriers in various construction stages on 6 different slipways. USS Lake Champlain established the ultimate wartime completion record. She was commissioned June 3, 1945, after just 15 months of construction. The speed came with human sacrifice. Shipyard accidents killed over 3,000 workers during the war. Margaret O'Brien lost her husband when a crane cable snapped at Four River Shipyard. She returned to work the next week, taking his place on the welding crew. Every ship they didn't build meant more gold stars in windows, she told her crew. The Japanese surrender delegation arrived aboard USS Missouri September 7, 1945. They had to sail past an American fleet that defied imagination. Over 100 carriers of all types filled Tokyo Bay and surrounding waters. This represented more carriers than all other nations combined had built in aviation history. Commander Tamichi Hara was one of Japan's most decorated destroyer captains. His observation captured the scope of American achievement. Japan had sunk 4 American carriers in 1942. America had replaced each one 3 times over. The final accounting of Essex-class carriers that saw World War II combat revealed the production miracle's scope. USS Essex CV-9 was commissioned December 34, 1942. USS Yorktown CV-10 joined April 15, 1943. USS Intrepid CV-11 was commissioned August 16, 1943. USS Hornet CV-12 entered service November 29, 1943. USS Franklin CV-13 was commissioned January 31, 1944. USS Ticonderoga CV-14 joined May 8, 1944. USS Randolph CV-15 was commissioned October 9, 1944. USS Lexington CV-16 had entered service February 17, 1943. USS Bunker Hill CV-17 was commissioned May 24, 1943. USS Wasp CV-18 joined November 24, 1943. USS Hancock CV-19 was commissioned April 15, 1944. USS Bennington CV-20 entered service August 6, 1944. USS Bonhomme Richard CV-31 was commissioned November 26, 1944. USS Shangri-La CV-38 joined September 15, 1944. Additional carriers were commissioned but saw no combat. USS Boxer was commissioned April 16, 1945. USS Lake Champlain entered service June 3, 1945. USS Antietam was commissioned January 28, 1945. Several more were commissioned after the war ended. This count excluded 9 Independence-class light carriers built on cruiser hulls. Over 100 escort carriers were produced during the same period. The shipbuilding revolution transformed American industry permanently. Wartime production techniques became standard practice after 1945. Modular construction, automated welding, and assembly line shipbuilding remained industry standards. Workers trained in shipyards became the backbone of post-war American industry. Women who learned welding discovered they could master any industrial task. African Americans restricted to menial jobs before the war had proved capable of precision work. By 1945, American carrier production exceeded operational needs. Ships were completing faster than crews could be trained. Admiral William Halsey testified to Congress in 1946. America had gone from too few carriers to more than could be used. No nation in history had ever produced combat vessels at such a rate. In 1985, on the 40th anniversary of VJ Day, a reunion was held at Newport News Shipbuilding. Over 5,000 former workers attended the gathering. Margaret Thompson, the welder from our story, was now 67 years old. She stood before the crowd with a powerful message. They called her generation the greatest generation. But they weren't great, she insisted. They were angry. The Japanese had sunk American ships and killed American boys. They answered the only way they knew how. They built more ships than Japan could imagine. Every rivet driven carried the message, "Remember Pearl Harbor." The carrier building program transformed military capability and the entire American economy and society. Richmond, California's population grew from 23,000 to 130,000 in 3 years. Over $3 billion in wages paid to shipyard workers flowed through the economy. This money helped build the American middle class. The shipyards broke social barriers that had existed for generations. Women proved capable of industrial work. African Americans demonstrated equal skills when given opportunities. By August 1945, the United States Navy operated 14 Essex-class fleet carriers that had seen combat. 3 additional Essex-class carriers were commissioned but didn't see combat. 9 Independence-class light carriers served alongside 71 escort carriers. Pre-war carriers still in service added to this incredible force. Japan operated 6 carriers, most without trained pilots. Britain possessed 19 carriers of all types. American naval aviation had achieved absolute dominance. In 1962, Rear Admiral Hideo Yano of the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force visited Norfolk Naval Shipyard. Many Essex-class carriers had been built where he stood. At USS Yorktown's launching site, Yano spoke through an interpreter. Japan knew America was building ships, but never imagined this scale. How do you fight a nation that can build in one yard what Japan built in its entire empire? Japan hadn't lost to the American Navy. They lost to American factories' workers and determination to produce beyond rational limits. Admiral Chester Nimitz offered the definitive assessment of the production miracle. The war was decided in 1943 not by any battle, but by launching new carriers. When America could lose a carrier and have 2 replacements already at sea, while Japan couldn't replace any losses, the outcome became mathematically certain. The legacy of that production miracle lives on today. Techniques pioneered from 1942 to 1945 remained standard in shipbuilding for decades. The most important legacy demonstrates what democratic societies can achieve when unified in purpose. In 36 months, America transformed from having 4 carriers sunk and facing potential defeat to possessing overwhelming carrier supremacy that made victory inevitable. The workers who achieved this miracle proved democracy's greatest weapon isn't military might, but productive capacity. The ability of free people to outbuild, outproduce, and ultimately overwhelm tyranny stands as freedom's greatest strength. The transformation from 4 carriers lost to 14 Essex-class carriers in combat remains history's greatest example of industrial response to military crisis. Those workers are nearly all gone now, but their achievement endures. In humanity's darkest hour, when fascism threatened to extinguish freedom, American workers responded with the greatest surge of productive power ever witnessed. The 4 carriers lost in 1942 were not just replaced, but multiplied. Lexington, Yorktown, Wasp, and Hornet were avenged by superior ships bearing their names. Each new carrier surpassed what was lost. Each one testified to democracy's capacity to transform disaster into triumph. Japan didn't lose to American strategy or tactics in the end. They lost to Margaret Thompson and her welding torch. They lost to millions of Americans who proved democracy's ultimate strength lies in the unlimited productive capacity of free people united in purpose. From 4 carriers lost to 14 Essex-class carriers in combat, the numbers tell a transformation story. This stands as history's greatest testament to what free people achieve when their freedom faces threats. They didn't just build ships, they built victory, freedom, and the future. Their legacy floats eternal in words inscribed on the memorial at Newport News Shipbuilding. Here, American workers answered tyranny with steel. They met fascism with freedom. They transformed defeat into the greatest production miracle in human history. The ocean that had swallowed 4 American carriers in 1942 would soon carry fleets beyond Japanese comprehension. Margaret Thompson and millions like her had rewritten the mathematics of naval warfare, one rivet at a time.